Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and today we'll be jumping into some malicious compliance. Our first story today comes to us from Technos. If I told you it wouldn't be hidden, let's jump right in. In the early noughties, I took a contract job with one of my previous employers. They wanted someone that they didn't have to train and that needed no supervision, and were willing to pay me the almost incredible amount I demanded to smooth my hurt feelings from the layoff. The job was easy. Age out 5 years of files to match their new retention scheme at my convenience. The new people the company had acquired in my absence, however, didn't want to let it be easy. Every evening, I'd return to my office to find it unlocked and rifled through. Boxes would have their security seals cut open, inventory lists would be missing, and entire stacks of files would mysteriously make their way back to the file room. You better bet I raised hell up the chain, but the requests made on my behalf seemed to fall on deaf ears. One of the perps even had the nerve to email me, saying I was only a temp, and that if I had a file she wanted, she would get it and there was nothing short of hiding them that would stop her. So that's what I did. In the back of the warehouse was a small room they'd once used to store coolant for mainframes, and I happened to know where a spare key was kept. All 4,100 files were vanished from my office and the file room and hidden away there. Crap hit the fan Monday morning when the perp who emailed me couldn't find an 11-year-old file she wanted. After letting herself into my office and finding it bare, she had the nerve to complain over email. I can't find file 90117 in the file room or in your office. That's because I took your fantastic suggestion and hid it, as well as every other file about to be aged out. They are not available. Please use the digital archive. Where did you hide it? If I told you it would no longer be hidden, use the digital archive. Listen, you insubordinate little crap, I want that file, and I want it delivered to my desk now. You can't always get what you want. Use the digital archive. Her final email CC'd to her boss called me a loser and suggested I get my unemployment forms filled out. Her boss had other ideas. Please come see me. Obviously, my last instruction to stay out of other people's offices was insufficient. We will also need to have a discussion about how emailing a very expensive consultant with improper demands has probably cost the company more than we pay you in a week. From that point on, I made a point to show up just early enough to catch the perp on her way out the door and smile at her. Ah yes, OP, the only way this could have been made better is if you put that file through a shredder and then delivered it to her desk along with a roll of Scotch tape. Do me a quick favor, have a look down below the video. If that subscribe button's still red, it means you're not actually subscribed to the KCC channel. Please hit that subscribe button for more daily Reddit stories. Our second story today comes to us from InvisiblePancreas. What? Don't lie to the residents. Let's jump right in. Was reminded of this little occurrence from a few years back today, thought I'd share it. Don't know if it's malicious in the traditional sense, but I did follow instructions to the letter and embarrass the one giving instructions, so I don't know. Tell me what you think. So about 3 years ago I worked for a care home. I still do work for a care home, but I also did 3 years ago. It's primarily nursing care with a little dementia care. The residents can range from being totally independent and capable of going about their day with minimal assistance from staff, to end-of-life care with checks every half hour to make sure there's always someone with them. The particular resident I'm going to be talking about here we'll call Dot, because she looked like the EastEnders character of the same name, only with a thick Liverpudlian accent. Dot had a great sense of pride and a low tolerance for anyone who she believed was talking down to her. She was largely independent, just had a few funny turns here and there. I was working a night shift when this happened, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., and it was round about midnight. My colleague was setting up breakfast trays for the morning, I believe, whilst the nurse was doing a few clerical duties. We had a nurse from an agency due to ours being ill. Agency workers can be a mixed bag here. Some are lovely, hardworking, and understanding. Some are grumpy and uptight. Some, we politely ask if they don't get sent again. The nurse that night fell squarely into the middle category. She would be snippy with the care staff, opting to do her work without any communication to us, unless it was absolutely necessary to hand anything over to us. Fair enough, nobody says you have to make friends here, and would treat the residents with a false smile and semi-condescending tone, sort of like you'd expect one to use when talking to small children. Dot was going through one of her funny turns. She had put her coat on and was trying to barge her way out the front door. I came across the reception area to find the nurse trying to talk to Dot, with Dot trying to get to the front door saying, "Get out of the way, you miserable old trout," to the nurse. The nurse was saying things like, "I'm sorry, Mrs. Dot, but we need to look after you here. It would be irresponsible of us to allow you to wander about outside at this time. You could seriously hurt yourself. Look, it's dark out." All things that seemed to make Dot angrier and angrier. After a while, Dot stormed off. I asked the nurse why Dot wanted to get out of the home. Because she has dementia? Yeah, but why in her own mind is she trying to leave? In her mind, it makes perfect sense for her to leave the home. What's her reasoning? Oh, she wants to go to the pharmacy. What difference does that make? We can't allow the residents out unsupervised for any reason, and especially not in the dead of the night. I'll talk to her. No, you will not. I know how people like you work. You'll say anything to keep the residents happy, even if it means filling their heads with lies. Well, I was taught that we have to be honest with the residents. And this is true. You can't tell a resident an outright lie, at least not where I work. If a resident with dementia is distraught because their mother hasn't given them a phone call, you cannot say to them something like, "Oh, but she did ring you a couple of hours ago, remember?" However, it's kind of frowned upon to say something like, "Your mother died 20 years ago." Dead people can't use the telephone. Instead, honest as it may be, you have to learn to use tact, omit details if they could cause distress, and treat the residents with some modicum of dignity. Anyway, somehow I convinced the nurse to let me speak to Dot. The nurse said that if she sees me lie to Dot, she will file a report and see that the home manager knows I am institutionalizing the residents, which is a very, very serious accusation here. We made our way to Dot's room. She is angrily stuffing things into her handbag at the time. The nurse folded her arms and stood in the doorway as I spoke to Dot. "Dot, what do you want, my name? What are you getting all dressed up for? Is something special happening? I need to get to the pharmacy. They have my medicine." "But Dot, it's Sunday. The pharmacy isn't open on Sunday." Dot stopped in her tracks. For the first time, she looked confused rather than angry. "Is it?" "Yes, Dot. Look, here's your clock. It says today's date on it, and it says Sunday. See?" Dot made a sheepish face to this. "Oh, oops. I suppose I'd better get settled. I do actually feel rather sleepy." I left Dot to it. When I walked out the door, the nurse is stunned that I handled it so easily. She tried to sputter out that it was still filling the resident's head with lies for the sake of a quiet life. I just asked her, "What day is it right now?" and she didn't have an answer. The nurse tried to speak to my colleague about my behavior later that night. My colleague basically told her that what I did was the same thing she would have done. When Dot had her funny turns, she would argue with you about the time of day, how safe it was outside, etc. But as you got to know the residents, you got to know what kind of advice they'd be willing to listen to. Anyway, there's the time an angry resident calmed down and a grouchy nurse got egg on her face. Hope you enjoyed. There's a lot to be said for somebody who knows the residents in a home and has spent a lot of time with them. OP did a great job of de-escalating this situation with the resident. They didn't just cut them off and tell them that they couldn't do what they wanted to do. They gave them a good reason for it that they would understand. Well done, OP. Our next story today comes to us from the AnalogKoala. You want 4 times the normal pepperoni? You got it, Chief. Let's jump right in. There was a really fun post this weekend about a guy ordering extra pepperoni that made me think a few people here might get a chuckle out of my own pepperoni experience. Back in high school in the early 90s, I worked at a pizza place. I used to open Sundays, which was great because it was just me and the guy who rolled the day's dough. We'd chat, listen to music, and the restaurant was usually dead. One Sunday in the early afternoon, this guy comes in and says he wants a pizza with extra pepperoni. He says he's asked for it before, but it's never been right. Never enough pepperoni. So he tells me we will pay for 4 toppings worth of pepperoni, and he wants 4 toppings worth on his pizza. Being the good employee I am, I say, you got it, Chief. Now, usually when people order multiple toppings, you get a bit less of each one. Like if you order pepperoni, salami, and ham, you'd get less pepperoni on there than a pure pepperoni pizza. This isn't entirely a ripoff. If you put too much meat on the pizza, it won't cook properly. Now, I'd been working there a couple years and I knew that 4 times the normal pepperoni wouldn't work, but I also knew it could be fun. So I went ahead and complied with the guy's request. I literally put 4 times the pepperoni of a pepperoni pizza on there, weighed it and everything. The freaking thing would not cook. Our pizzas usually take 10 minutes. This thing was in there like 20 and would still fold when you put the paddle in there. 5 minutes later though, I see it, a bubble. First the size of a large pimple, then it grew to the size of a big cyst, then the size of a mountain. It was crazy. It had to be 6 inches high. I called the other guy out from the back so he could see it. I wish we had phones in those days so I could have taken a picture. Now, we get bubbles in our pizza from time to time, and we had a special hook on a long metal pole we would use to reach into the oven and pop them. I opened the oven door and gingerly reached in with the pole and poked the pizza. It erupted like Mount St. Helens and a fountain of grease spurted up and hit the roof of the oven. It was horrifying. It actually pulsed 3 or 4 times like the pepperoni monster had a beating heart. A cheese and pepperoni bubble spurting grease is not something you can unsee. I continually stabbed it until the bubble subsided. It was carnage. I still have nightmares about the grease fountain. Finally, we had to take this pizza out. The grease had completely and utterly consumed the dough, and the thing was as soggy as a wet towel, but the top layer of pepperoni was crispy and would start burning soon. I cut it into pieces, and I swear to God it squished with each slice of the knife. I put it in the box and handed it over with a smile. I wish I could have seen the guy take his first disgusting bite. He didn't come back. Apparently, there's a lot of pizza experts in the comments for this story, and what they're saying is that you should get a small aluminum pan, like they use for a lasagna takeaway, put the sliced pepperoni in, and heat that pile up in the oven. Meanwhile, cook the pizza, but without the pepperoni on top. Pour away all the oil and dump the pepperoni on the pizza, give it another minute or 2 in the oven, take it out, and serve it. That sounds absolutely tasty. Our next story today comes to us from YLWY. If anyone knows how to pronounce that, let me know. Boss says I don't know anything yet, so I do the absolute bare minimum. Let's jump right in. Some background: I started my first full-time office job at a corporate America hellhole a week after college. It was an industry I hadn't worked in before and I needed to be licensed. The company that hired me, we'll call them Smith Inc., paid for my licensing fees, study materials, classes, etc. for me to become licensed. The total cost was about $500. It was a sweet deal. They gave me approximately 90 days paid to study a textbook and pass an online course. I didn't have to do any work for the company, simply study and pass the licensing exam. It was pretty easy and I passed on my first try. My boss, let's call her Mary, was super excited that I passed, and I began training under an associate level coworker who had just been promoted from the position I was in. The coworker, Jen, was super great and helpful. She began training me on 2 simple tasks that I could do. The only rule was if the client had a question specifically about their contract, I would ask Jen or forward it to my team lead. Well, I ended up getting an email from a client about their contract, and I video called Jen to ask how to handle. She walked me through it as I shared my screen with her. I wrote the email back to the client exactly how she told me, and she read the email before sending. A month goes by and everything is great. I'm learning and getting more comfortable. Then I get a really nasty email from Mary. She CCs my whole team into the email, going on and on about how I cannot answer contract questions and how she's gone over this with me before. She hadn't. Jen was the one who told me I can't answer contract questions. Both Jen and I tried to explain what happened and that Jen was the one who wrote the email. I just typed what Jen said and sent it from my email since the client emailed me and not Jen. Mary then calls the team up in a video call and goes on about how I don't know anything and I just started and I really don't know how this industry works and that answering contract questions is out of my job description. It went on for about 5 minutes. I say, okay, and get off the call crying. The next day, out of pure pettiness, I simply do the absolute bare minimum. I don't know anything, right, Mary? I still complete all my tasks and everything that's required of me. Anything more advanced that I would normally try to learn with Jen's help? Nope. I just forwarded it to our team lead and said, sorry, Mary said I can't do anything outside of my job description. Work was much less stressful after I decided to listen to Mary, and what many others told me before, don't do anything outside of your job description. Also, Mary later fired me for being a whistleblower when I reported the company to the health authority for violating COVID protocols. I sleep better at night knowing how much money Mary wasted on training me. OP, if you can prove that you were fired for being a whistleblower, then you need to get yourself a lawyer. Not only will they have wasted money on training you, but they're gonna waste a lot of money on the payout that you're entitled to. Our last story today comes to us from Overripe Mandrake. How my boss gave me an extra week of holiday. Let's jump right in. A few years back, I worked in a call center for a well-known car rental company. Management was what you would expect from such a place. Micromanagement was everywhere, breaks timed to the minute, you get the gist. Well, you'd be surprised to learn that holidays were no different. On a 60+ people floor, if 2 people were out on holidays, yours wouldn't get approved. I had been doing this job for a couple of years, so I knew that I had to keep track of my holiday balance, as HR was famous for messing up your days. Now that you know what I was dealing with that particular year, I had managed to get all my holidays approved up until Christmas. Imagine my surprise when my team leader came up to me and told me I had a week left on my balance. I asked her to check with HR because something was obviously wrong. The day after, I get an email from HR basically saying, no, you wrong, HR right, by the way, you're on holiday next week. That's when I stopped and thought, why am I fighting this? I said okay, took my week off, and waited for the phone call, and then it came. My team lead announced that the time off was given by mistake, so I had to either give up a week of next year's balance, or it would be deducted from my pay as unpaid time off. I laughed, said no chance, and laughed some more before hanging up. Then, I sent an email to a solicitor that confirmed my suspicions of their claims being completely illegal. Next Monday, my team lead comes to me before I even get to my desk and tells me about a meeting she scheduled with me and HR to settle things. Said okay, turned my computer on, and forwarded my conversation with the solicitor to HR, my team lead, and our manager for good measure. Said email read something like, do you really want that week back that bad? 5 minutes later, team lead comes back with a carnivorous grin and tells me to go to the manager's office. I get there and find out that my manager was never made aware of the issue. She gets her phone and calls the HR manager, basically tells him to sit on it, and then begins to apologize to me. We laugh it off and I leave to start my day. As soon as I get to my desk, I see my team lead heading toward the manager's office. She came back looking like a sad puppy. I'm sitting back here right now trying to figure out who the bigger a-holes are in this story, whether it's HR or that team lead. What do you guys think? I'd love to see your comments down below. Thanks to all 5 OPs, check them out in the description down below. Thanks for watching, have a wonderful day, we'll see you tomorrow.